Welcome back to another segment of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons. As I continue to speak about different episodes from over the seasons, I am at season 7, and this is episode number 8, The Illusion. If you are enjoying these episodes, please do hit like and subscribe. The Illusion was written by John McGreevy and directed by Walter Alsman. The Illusion introduced the character of JD Pickett, played by the wonderful Louis Arquette. We find out that JD is going to be reopening his father's factory as a defense plant. Early on, Olivia is at Ike's store. She is basically babysitting John Curtis for Mary Ellen, who is off to work, and she comes across Verdie there. And so we find out that Verdie's daughter, Esther, Verdie has not heard from. She had sent her a letter. It comes back with no forwarding address and that she's moved. And Verdie, this doesn't make any sense to her because she says that Esther would not move without letting her know. So Verdie's a little confused by this. What I did notice in this scene is that Ike comes and he hands a lollipop to John Curtis, which just reminded me that frequently, in order to keep the two young infants, Michael and Marshall Reed, when we were working with them, to kind of keep them happy and stuff, they would often be given pieces of candy. Now, frequently, when I was working and I was carrying John Curtis around, many times I was wearing my white nurse's uniform. Well, they would a lot of times give them these candies that were like peppermint sticks. So they were those red and white swirled sticks. So they'd end up drooling on me, or they'd have sticky hands. So I'd end up with this like pink and white drool on my white nurse's uniform. It was always quite a challenge. I was never thrilled by the let's bribe the kids with candy. First of all, the sugar rush, not good. And also that I ended up with all of this stuff all over me. I've also been asked about working with the infants and how comfortable they seemed with me. And I nurtured that because it was challenging. Their aunt usually brought them to the set because if their mother was there, it was really hard for them. They didn't want to leave their mother. So they would cry when they were taken away from her, which I totally understand. They were young and they're being handed to people they don't really know. Their aunt they were more familiar with, and they were most comfortable being with whoever they knew best. So I would spend a lot of time just babysitting them. So if I was going to be working with whichever one I was working with at the time, when I first got them from the aunt, I would then just keep them. If I gave him back to his aunt, then we had to go through the whole process of taking him away again. And I don't want to leave my aunt and I don't really know you. And so I tried to develop that relationship so that they did seem comfortable with me. And if I was the most familiar to them, then they were happiest to be with me. And then, of course, they got to know Michael and Cammie, who also Elizabeth interacted with them a lot. And of course, I've talked about how adorable Ralph Waite was with all of the babies. He was just a natural with babies. So that's a little bit of the behind the scenes of working with the toddlers. Ike is very proud to show off his new honor roll that lists all of the various different young men from Waltons Mountain who are serving in the different branches of the military. Verdie is not so pleased to see that Jody, who has enlisted, is listed separately as part of the colored soldiers, and feels that should not have that separate distinction there. Erin is looking for work and knows that JD's plant is hiring. So she says she's going to go and see about getting a job. Jason drives her over there. They walk in. There's tons of people around looking for jobs. They come across JD, who clearly knows them. So he says, yeah, what do you want to do? And yeah, of course I'll hire you. And if you have anybody else in the family who wants to be hired. He brags about how he is paying 60 cents an hour for the work, and that workers are going to make about $30 a week with overtime. They're going to be doing at least 40 hours, and that's more than anyone else is paying. So I thought that was interesting to hear. and JD does hire Erin. Leaving JD, as Erin and Jason are driving along the road, they come across Esther carrying her baby, and they offer her a lift. And we find out that Esther and Erin have known each other. She's obviously known the family, and she talks about how Erin used to tag along. Erin talks about how she just loved being wherever Esther was and wanting to do what Esther was doing. So we learn about the history of that relationship. A couple of things I noticed as they stop to talk to Esther. We see a couple of different shots here, and I noticed that there seemed to be this pile of leaves in front of the front left tire of the car. And my immediate thought was, oh, they've created a mark for John to aim for in terms of where he's going to stop that car. And there were times where the pile of leaves seemed to be just slightly different relative to that wheel, which then said to me, oh, these were different shots, different setups, or the different takes, and the car didn't land in exactly the same place. So those are the types of things, again, that catch my eye. With trying to hit marks in a car, it was always challenging. David Doremus talked about that when I spoke with him, because you had to put something down that the driver could use as a target, but that wouldn't look like an obvious mark to the audience in a wider shot. So things like rocks or sticks or twigs became those sort of landmarks that we looked for in being able to hit the right spot when we were driving a vehicle. You can tell a lot about what's going on around by watching babies and dogs. So when we worked with Reckless, or in this case where we're working with Michael or Marshall, whichever of the two twins it was at this moment, Olivia comes in and you can watch the focus of John Curtis. He's kind of looking off, which you wouldn't think anything about, but to me it tells me that there were the people around, and so he had come in and he was kind of looking around at something that was off out of the screen, so the camera or people standing near the camera or something like that. He's not reacting to them, but we just see that, and I would see the same sort of thing when we worked with the dog, because the dog would be looking to where the trainer was and looking for his next cue from the trainer. So the dog was frequently focused not quite at the action going on unless the trainer gave him a signal to go interact somehow with what was happening in the scene. At Verdie's house, we're back on one side of Drusilla's pond. That water that you see there is the other side of Drusilla's pond from where you typically saw us splashing in the water or fishing, or where the little bridge was. So that was sort of the other side of Drusilla's pond. And this house was on the other side, and that house got used for a lot of different people's homes. And in this case, it is Verdie's house. And Esther arrives with her baby, whose name eludes me at the moment, but it's somewhere in my notes and I can't find it. But she tells Verdie that she's here for a while because things with her husband didn't work out and he is now gone. Todd Bridges is back in this episode as Josh once more, and he is very frustrated by school because he feels that he's not learning the things he wants to learn, that it's all too basic for him, and he would like to learn the things that the children are learning at the white school. Verdie reminds him he should be grateful that he is getting the opportunity to learn it all, to read and write as a child rather than having to wait and learn it as an adult, as she had to. At Pickett's factory, Erin has been assigned a job on the assembly line, and they are making mess kits and canteens and things. And you see her struggling with the motions and the actions that she needs to do for her part of the assembly line. When Esther goes to Ike's store, Corbeth manages to put her foot in her mouth once again by talking about not rocking the status quo. And Esther is very offended by that and feels that is very defensive about the idea of what is the point of having dreams and hopes for oneself if there is never the opportunity to actually implement those dreams or chase them. Why even bother in the first place? Meanwhile, Erin is getting into more and more trouble on this assembly line and just not keeping up. And finally, JD's coming along and saying, you got to pick it up, we're behind. And she says to JD that she can't do this job, but can she please do something else that she's better suited for? And JD's feeling is, no, this is the job you need to do. So he has no sense of putting the right person in the right job. He has no experience hiring people or managing personnel, which is what Esther got her. She got a business degree and in personnel, and that is her area of expertise. But she has a conversation with Verdie about what's going on and that she feels that her education has ruined her life because now she doesn't fit in and she has all this skill, but nobody will hire her, and that she's just frustrated because she was raised up to a position and given all this hope, and now it's crashing down around her because she's in a time period where people aren't willing to hire her and allow that forward progress of allowing a woman and a Black woman to have a power position where she is going to be overseeing white men. Verdie is crushed by hearing that Esther is feeling that the dreams that Verdie had for her have kind of ruined her life. But Esther had that same dream and she went after it. So I don't feel that it can be totally put on Verdie's shoulders that it was something she pushed Esther to do that Esther didn't want to do. Erin feels that the issues that JD is having with personnel and hiring, that Esther would be the perfect solution because that's what she does. So she takes Esther to see JD, and JD basically makes the assumption about Esther and says, oh, well, if I already have a cleaning person, and so if I need some more help, I'll let you know. And he's not quite willing yet to concede that point. And she lets JD know that he's going to lose his contract with the War Department, with the government, because he doesn't know how to put the right person in the right job. And as they're falling behind and not delivering, he's going to lose the contract. So they sort of just put it to JD in that way, but he's not at that moment willing to concede. Verdie comes to terms with how she's feeling about all of it and confronts Esther and says basically that it was a good dream, and it is a good dream, and it's important to have those dreams and to not just accept the status quo, and that dream that she had on Esther's behalf, even though Verdie had to work so hard to put Esther through college, that dream got her through so many tough times, so she's not willing to say that it was all a mistake. Ultimately, Esther does go back to JD and push on it more, and JD finally agrees to give Esther a trial run, and Esther says, give me a week, 2 weeks, whatever, and if things haven't improved, then you can fire me and you don't even have to pay me. So JD finally decides that, well, okay, he'll give it a shot, because he realizes that otherwise he's going to be potentially in big trouble and lose that contract. In tying up one other piece of this story, Verdie basically says to Ike regarding his honor roll that she wants him to put Jody's name where it rightfully belongs, just as one of the men from Waltons Mountain who is serving, or take his name off of the honor roll altogether, because she doesn't feel that it's appropriate for there to be that separation when all of these young men are off serving to defend the same country. Although we never actually see Esther there working again, we have the sense that It has been a positive step forward for Esther and consequently for Verdie. And so kind of a triumph overall. This episode included a number of our favorite people. We had Ike and Corbeth back, Joe Conley and Ronnie Claire Edwards. Lynn Hamilton, always a pleasure to have her. She was back as Verdie. I mentioned Todd Bridges was back as Josh again. This was, I think, the last episode he did before he went off to do his series. And we had then other actors who came in to play Josh. Introduction of Louis Arquette as JD Pickett. And of course, we continued to see him throughout the season and in a number of episodes. And the wonderful Joan Pringle was in this episode playing Esther. Thank you for joining me for this segment of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons about the episode from season 7, The Illusion. I'll be back with more Behind the Scenes of the Waltons, more episodes, more Ask Judy, and more special guests. Thanks for watching.